Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, so as Daisy said, my name is Mikus. I'm one of Daisy's classmates back from The Ohio State University, Fisher College of Business, graduated back in 2004, so a little over 20 years ago. I'm born and raised in Chicago, and that's where I'm currently living right now in Chicago and working in Chicago. Education-wise, I undergrad went to Brown University, had a career, various career in financial services and in sales, but went back to business school full time to get an MBA in finance and international business, hence the 2004 business MBA degree. And then for about 10 years after that, I was in financial services within structured finance, securitization products, collateralized debt obligations, collateralized loan obligations, those types of products, working with originally LaSalle Bank, became ABN AMRO, Bank of America Merrill Lynch, and for about 4 years, I was actually over in London, running our entire London office in structured finance. But then about 10 years ago now, I found myself traveling all over the world nonstop and had young kids at home and wanted to make a transition. So about 10 years ago, actually now about 12 years ago, I moved into commercial real estate. Having a strong finance background and sales background, family friend had mentioned that that's probably a good route to go into, and wasn't as much travel because of being very localized in that sense in real estate. And I initially got into real estate brokerage, but have since moved into brokerage, investment and development. So that's what I'm here to talk to you guys about tonight, experience of the last 10 years in commercial real estate, and how, as part of that, you may know within commercial real estate as an industry, it is compensation deferred. So it's entirely commission based. So can't really retire after commission based if you're trying to build up a nest egg. So you see most real estate practitioners may start off in the brokerage just to get get the foot in the ground, but moving into development investment. And that's where over the last couple of years I've moved into, specifically 3 years ago. And I can help share that story. But about 3 years ago, moved into purchasing a building in Three Rivers, Michigan, which is about 2.5 hours east of Chicago. And the building itself, we developed and opened a cannabis dispensary. So now it's a business that has a cannabis dispensary, which is fully recreational legal in Michigan. And in addition to that, kind of developed the building and created a synergistic type of offering within the cannabis space. So that's kind of the background in a nutshell, what brought me to where I am tonight. Again, I'm in Chicago, but I do own and run a business out in Michigan, so I'm there every other week, and that kind of got me started. So that's the background, Daisy. I don't know if you want me to go into anything specifically or just kind of continue to expand from there.
Okay, so do we have any initial questions first? Okay, Jalen.
So hi, my name is Jalen Wilson. I'm also a finance student here at ASU. My question is, you said that you worked in kind of finance and then you came back to get your MBA. Now doing commercial real estate, is a degree, do you find that a degree, getting your MBA was important to you? Or you could have done this without getting your MBA?
That's a great question. To be honest with you, I think it would have been a lot harder without the MBA. In particular, because I did change industries. So I was working kind of ancillary in finance, but doing more of again, kind of a consulting roles. And I wanted to because I really didn't have the finance background. My undergraduate degree was in international relations, IR, so liberal arts degree from Brown. So I felt having financial sort of education would help in the long run. So again, that's why I went back and got my MBA in finance. But just as a whim, I also, as I said, I have an MBA in finance, but I also have a minor in international business and a minor in real estate. And it just so happened, I really didn't know much about real estate prior to that. I took a couple of classes and found some interest there, and I actually ended up having a minor in real estate, not realizing that actually that would be the future of my career. And the one thing that I got into in finance, straight out of just receiving the MBA, was structured finance. And as part of that structured finance in the time, and this is again in 2004, 2005, 2006, It was structured finance within commercial residential mortgage-backed securitization, so CMBS, RMBS. So, and specifically, I initially ran a group called Total Return Swaps, which is, don't have to get into the details of it, but it essentially these are products that I was able to, when I was interviewing for the job, speak to because I had taken roughly classes about securitization in real estate at MBA finance. So even though it wasn't really something I studied in finance, it's kind of what got me in the door was having that real estate. And then since then, everything I had with finance and with I've taken classes in entrepreneurialism and international business, and has really kind of helped me get where I am today because I'm able to, again, start up my own business. And as part of that, the explanation of explain how the business started, really getting out there, putting together a whole business pitch, a proposal, raising the capital, and then and having investors as well as being one of the majority owners. So I hope that answered your question. But
It did, thank you.
Another question? Okay, so if not, could you tell us a little bit more, like what you actually do in commercial real estate?
Sure. Yep. So the job I have in commercial real estate, which we can call my day job, is I do work here in Chicago. I've been about 12 years now within commercial real estate, in really just kind of focusing on full service commercial real estate initially, trying to find clients and working with a few clients that are looking for investments to develop potential properties, to develop investments and work with investors and you know, institutional type of real estate investors and developers. So I had a great amount of experience working with those individuals, again, strictly in Illinois. And if you're not familiar with how the industry works, is it is separately licensed by each state. So I do have a brokerage license in Illinois, which was simply going back to taking classes, 90 hours of required classwork followed by multiple examinations, state and federal examinations to get your state. It's a little different in every state, but generally speaking, there's a federal part of the license and a state part of the license. So I sat and received the Illinois license again about 12 years ago or so. And that was really just to kind of start working in the industry and assisting clients. I joined some family friends that have been in the industry previously, and they're the ones that more or less convinced me that it makes sense having a background in finance and sales really lends well to a career in commercial real estate because it's very sales driven, but also because it's the commercial side of it, it's much more about return on investments, IRR, cap rates, other types of things that make commercial real estate investments profitable or at least on paper, and you know, working with clients to try and develop and source investments that made sense. So again, the real estate side of it, getting into it was really kind of just a starting point to kind of figure out how I myself might be able to start a career in development, commercial development. So again, working with a firm here in Chicago with family friends, really got involved understanding the basics of it. And then in about 2018 or so, 2017, 2018, Illinois had passed medical cannabis use back in 2015, and they were discussing recreational legalization, which was coming around by 2019. So I started working with a couple of companies here in Illinois, Illinois-based cannabis firms that were starting to look for real estate for cannabis, whether it was as a grow facility, as a retail, as a warehouse for transporters, for vehicles and so forth. But there were different types of real estate requirements. So really kind of with the newer industry, really went in, found all the municipal codes, did a lot of research to understand what the industry requirements were and then how that might relate to cannabis. And then the state did publish everyone who was receiving cannabis licenses or applied. So I was able to very easily send out just a mass mailing to everyone saying that I'm involved in commercial real estate for cannabis and cannabis consulting. And as a result, got quite a few clients out of it, about 5-6 clients in the cannabis industry. So I started working with them almost exclusively at the time, put together a whole team in 2019 because it was really, really rapidly picking up here in Illinois. And the idea was January 1st, 2020, every facility that was already existing in Illinois would automatically get a second license for recreational in their existing location, as well as another license where they can find a secondary location. So I started working with those clients early on that had received what we called automatic second licenses to find for them those the real estate property. And again, you have to looking not just the zoning requirements and setback requirements, because you can't be near schools, you can't be near various, depending on municipality, each rule is different in each city. So some are parks, some are nursery schools, some are senior living facilities. So really kind of different. So you had to understand the nuances and do the research, and worked for years, or I should say initially starting in 2019 into 2020 with these groups. And then, as we know, 2020, about 5 years ago, almost well, 5 years ago from yesterday, COVID really shut everything down. So I had about a dozen or so properties that we were working on to open dispensaries. My clients had somewhere upwards of about 17, 18 licenses we were trying to place around the state of Illinois. And as having worked on it for about a year and a half, everything just came to a screeching halt 5 years ago. Not just the one side of it where obviously we couldn't really get in or secure leases within the state of Illinois, but also the whole licensing structure, everything fell apart. And everything in Illinois just shut down and stopped, and licenses that were supposed to be issued in April ended up taking about a whole nother year till they were actually issued. But as a result of the COVID, I do have grown up, even though here in Chicago, I've had a family house out in Michigan, Three Rivers, Michigan, and a small little lake out there, little lake community where I'd been going my entire life, and had very close friends, family friends. In fact, lots of family friends around this one single lake, and in fact, friends from university, from undergraduate that actually lived there. So during COVID, we quarantined there for about 6 months. So moved out of Chicago, moved to Michigan just to be in the middle of the woods. My neighbor from across the street was a good friend of mine who actually had gone to Brown. I grew up with her, and she had a master's degree in plant biology. So she had the really interesting experience in something completely different from what I had, which was finance and real estate, and raising capital and securing investors and so forth. She had a plant biology master's where she really understood the science behind cannabis. And I remember one specific social networking campfire we were at, Friday evening happy hour campfire, or socially distanced. We started talking about how much we'd been doing in cannabis. She herself had been growing in Michigan privately, and I working in Illinois. We said, well, if there's ever a chance here in our township, because at this point in time it was still under prohibition, so they hadn't legalized it. So if there's ever an opportunity within our township, we would love to go ahead and try and make it happen. So about a year later, end of let's say early March of 21. Our township, of course, saw how everybody it was an industry that really took off during COVID, cannabis. That is, many places said it was a necessary requirement, so it was exempt from any sort of lockdowns or shutdown. So it was a business that continued to thrive, even though new ones couldn't open, because that part of the industry was shut down. So those that were in place had incredible years from 2019, 2020, and so forth. And as a result, our municipality in 21 realized that everybody was driving to other towns to purchase cannabis. So they basically proposed an ordinance to legalize in our township of Three Rivers. My neighbor, who happened to also volunteer for the township, received word and got a draft of the ordinance, and we saw specifically that in the ordinance there was a zoning page of where they wanted it and did not want it in the city, and there was a specific building that they had more or less circled on this draft ordinance and said, we want one here. So my partner and I, the very next day, we went out and bought that building. And then here we are some 3 years later, and like I said, we've done a great job of really establishing the business and figuring out how to grow the investment itself and grow the building. And before I do have things I can share, so I don't know, Daisy, if I can share, but before I get in, I want to see if anybody has any questions. There is a question on Zoom I see from Kevin. If you want to, yep.
Kevin,
Hello, my name is Kevin Gardner. I'm a business management major here at ESU. I'm actually in a different class with Professor Wang. It's actually managing medical marijuana business. So my question to you was, well, it's kind of like two questions. One, have you been following the rescheduling hearing? If so, can you explain, even though I don't think it'll happen, what would happen if they were to reschedule it from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3? What would happen for state legal dispensaries?
Okay, great questions. Yeah, so before I get in, I guess the financing and the side of the cannabis dispensary in Michigan, to kind of back up and talk a little about the laws and what's happening right now. Um, I'm sure many of you know it's legalized in many states. I know Pennsylvania, you guys are working on it right now, and I think exactly what a lot of the states are seeing is the tax benefits, the tax revenue that can be raised is pretty tremendous. But it is a Schedule One narcotic on a federal basis. And for those of you who don't know the scheduling, a Schedule One narcotic is basically means it's a drug that is deadly and has zero beneficial components to it. It's an addictive, deadly drug. So other Schedule One drugs are heroin, crack, stuff like that. That is clearly addictive. Clearly, it doesn't have any benefit, and is in many cases can be deadly. So cannabis was added to that by Richard Nixon, was added as a Schedule One drug because as many protesters in the late 60s and early 70s, as they referred to as hippies, they were against the Vietnam War, but they were all smoking cannabis or pot, as they referred to it back then. President Nixon decided if I made it a Schedule One drug, it's an attack against everybody who's against Vietnam. That was the only reason that they added it back in the late 60s. It's been there ever since. What it means is that it is federally prohibited in every sense of the way. So it can't be researched by anybody. You can't anybody who's international or should say is a institutional organization, financial organization that might have mortgages or has anything with the government is not allowed to partake in that. Any banks, money center banks, are not allowed to partake because it is a Schedule One prohibited narcotic, and it's also federally illegal still. So the process of moving it to Schedule 3 is what Biden had started the process of removing it from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3, which Schedule 3 says that it's a narcotic that's controlled, but it does potentially have some medical or other types of benefits to it. And it's a drug that, as long as it's scrutinized and maintained and regulated, it can be prescribed. So typically your Schedule 3 type narcotics are the ones that are prescribed via pharmacies and doctors. So stuff like codeine and stuff like that. It is a painkiller, and it has to be prescribed, and then it can be picked up at pharmacies. So to your question, the biggest potential difference that I see on the one side from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3 is, again, Schedule 3 drugs tend to be issued in pharmacies. So there's a question of, will it then become Walgreens and CVS and everyone trying to get involved and having it actually dispensed from pharmacies? And then you might have larger companies like your Philip Morris or your Molson Coors and trying to actually make cannabis large farms and cannabis beverages, tonic beverages. So that's one side of it. I think it'll increase competition. But moving from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3 does not make it federally legal. There would have to be a full legalization process. However, the most important part and what really affects our business on a daily basis is, as part of in the 80s when they had back, if anybody remembers, the Miami Vice type days where they had a lot of illegal narcotics coming in the country, and they had drug kingpins in Miami and various places. The IRS decided to, or the government decided to try and put restrictions into federal tax code to really more or less hamper and create issues for our drug dealers. And as a result, it's a clause in IRS code called 280E. And what 280E does is effectively says, if you're involved in illegal narcotics, which is kind of ironic because, I mean, who's going to submit tax returns saying I'm a drug dealer? But these tax returns, you are not allowed as a business owner involved in Schedule 1 narcotics, or Schedule 2 for that matter. You're not allowed to take standard business deductions in operating your business. So the only thing you can deduct via 280E is the cost of goods, so the cost of the inventory. You can't deduct anything else. There's no rent, no utilities, no typical operating expenses for a business, no salaries, anything. So effectively, what 280E does for the cannabis industry is it creates more or less an artificial tax rate of about 70% on the industry. So that's why you see a lot of cannabis companies struggling because they're making money, they're selling, but they're not. There's massive tax hits, in particular smaller ones that are not what are referred to the MSO, the multi-state operators that have fully integrated vertical solutions from grow, what they call from seed to sale, so from grow to transport to distribution. So that's the biggest thing with moving to Schedule 3. It won't necessarily federally legalize it. It'll make it easier for the state-run dispensaries to get financing, and institutions and banks can start to participate. But until it's fully legalized, it really isn't then federal unless they change some sort of federal law that it's federally legal, even as a Schedule 3 narcotic. So hope that answers long-winded there, but it's to kind of follow up on that, like I said, Biden started it. The DEA started having hearings about it, moving it from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3. There's a lot of opinions that have come out in support of it, saying it made sense because it does have medical attributes to it. But that's all kind of blown up, and it's not sure when that'll happen again. In particular, the last couple of months, November, December into January, the DEA was trying to put together, or the FDA, the Federal Drug Administration, was trying to put together hearings with the DEA to try and reclassify it to Schedule 3. And it was found that the DEA was more or less collaborating with the anti-cannabis movement and had improper communications with them, and also had kind of stacked the hearings with anti-cannabis participants. So the DEA, the judge overseeing it, threw the whole case out, saying this is not proper. So we don't know where we are right now. It's all back to, I'm not sure if anything's going to happen in the near term in terms of rescheduling even, let alone 280E. So
Thank you. Thank you.
okay, no problem.
Any other questions related to the commercial real estate?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yep.
What are like some of the well, I'm Preston, Machado, by the way. But what are the challenges you face with like commercial like property and stuff like that?
From what perspective? You mean buying it, managing it, selling it, working
I
with
would
clients?
I would say managing it.
Well, so managing part of it is not too bad. If you've got if you've figured everything out up front, if you make sure that when you're putting together your pro forma financials on the property, it's always best to be really conservative and over plan, over budget, so that way you have enough of a buffer in case things shouldn't work out, but or don't always work out as they're expected to. But when you're coming into an investment of a property as an owner of it, it has to make sense on paper first. And again, that's what I'll show you guys in a couple of minutes, how we're working through. You do a pro forma on a business, but you also do pro formas on a property. So understanding, what is the capital outlay and what are the potential returns, the net operating income on a property. So that is your gross revenue minus your operating expenses before any sort of financing expenses. So understanding what your cap rate is, which is basically your yield on the investment, and then managing the tenants themselves. So that was the other side of it is, we bought the building. It basically is a 4-unit building. Our cannabis takes 1 unit. We were able to put a taco restaurant in the 2nd unit and then a liquor store in the 3rd and 4th unit combined. So we were able to create a center that has, taco, liquor, and cannabis, kind of call it TLC, where everybody should start their Friday or Saturday nights. But the other side of it is, if you've managed properly and prepared and you're able to build up some capital reserves, then it shouldn't be a difficulty. Anything that pops up, you should be able to handle it. But everyday things change. Your tenants want something, or something goes wrong with the unit, or something happens that public bathrooms get clogged up in the building as an example because of excessive use because of the restaurant or something. So you have to figure out how to manage everybody together and get everybody to work together and understand that it's multiple businesses there that are working together, and the end goal is for everyone to be successful. But it's really kind of those nuances of what your tenants and potential building issues that always crop up. I would add that again, this is commercial, which again could be residential technically in terms of the way it's defined. If a building has 5 units or more, it's considered a commercial multifamily investment property. But if it has 4 or less, it's considered just residential building. But and that it just has to do with the financing of it. But again, if you have residential properties, then that's a whole nother can of words because you're pretty much the one on call 24/7, and there will be problems that go wrong with every single apartment. I can say that for sure. So,
Thank you.
Okay.
So I also have a question. My name is Vince Rotundo. I'm with the business management major here in East Stroudsburg. So in addition to conservative budgeting to safeguard and manage risk, what other types of strategic and technical safeguards do you put in place for risk?
well, I mean, risk management is something you're always doing. So we as the way we've set up the property there, it's myself and again my partner who lives out there. We have a third silent partner that really is involved, but the myself and the other partner, we're meeting at least monthly, if not twice a month, just to kind of go over, okay, what's happening, reviewing the financials, reviewing expenses, making sure that we have certain contracts that are ballooning expense-wise, and making sure we can control those expenses, that they don't get out of control, out of control from a budgeting standpoint. But again, things are constantly changing, so you don't really necessarily know if one snowstorm or if you're going to have 30 snowstorms in a winter, because each one's going to require snow removal. So we've been fortunate this year. I think we've only had two snowstorms, so it only cost us about $400 of snow removal this year, or it could be 10,000 next year for all we know. So it's kind of expenses like that you want to make sure you're prepared for, and make sure you know your calendars as well. So taxes are due, when leases rates are increasing, when inspections and anything you might have. So the risk management of the building itself is incredibly important. So it's a constant focus on making sure it's being managed properly. The repair on it as well, you want to make sure you set aside for capital expenditures. Fortunately, everything we do with this building is new, so it's new HVAC systems. So knock on wood, we should be good for 10 to 15 years. But you never know. Some things, we built a whole kitchen for the restaurant. So again, there's equipment in there that could break down, and it's part of our leases. We own the kitchen. So again, if anything is problematic there, we have to repair it. But really all you can do is, the one side of it, making sure you have capital on hand, making sure, obviously if you don't, you'll have to do capital calls from your investors if anything comes out uncertain. But also just kind of, like I said, I was just there last week, and we did our planning for the entire year. So looking at capital expenditures for the next 12 months, looking at things that we want to do to improve the building, things that we want to do to help promote everybody within the building, such as billboards and signs and whatnot. There's also safety and security. We had issues with some of our neighbors in terms of, we had high traffic, as you can imagine. So we've put in speed bumps and caution signs, and taken upon ourselves to kind of go above and beyond from physical risk side. And then lastly, obviously, you want to make sure you have plenty of insurance, all sorts of insurance, from liability insurance to loss of use of the structure. And we were able to, last year as well, refinance the whole building into a commercial mortgage, which we had previously was a private mortgage. But again, it's even though the building is a separate entity than the cannabis facility, the tenant is cannabis, so the restrictions even go on the building. So money center banks, national banks, mortgage companies could not work with us. All we could work with were state banks or agricultural banks or credit unions. So we were able to work with, actually, the State Bank of Michigan has been great in helping us refinance and get things done. But they know that it's a tough market, and that's going to be a problem too, so they're going to charge a premium. You know, you can look at your typical mortgage rates and add about 5-6% on top of that for cannabis. And some of them even go beyond that. I mean, it's almost predator lending in many cases. So getting back to the whole 280E, capital is expensive in the cannabis industry, and any real estate tied to cannabis. So it's a real expensive business to get into, and that's why you see a lot of them struggling, because even though they're sales are going well, it's just the bottom line. There's so much to cover on it. So I hope that helps. But again, it's really just it's always monitoring is one of the most important things, because the risk monitoring, you want to be able to monitor risk looking forward and not monitor risk by using a rear view mirror. No one likes to see their house burned down from a rear view mirror. You want to make sure you're putting in the smoke detectors and alarms and everything so that you prevent it. So
Thank you.
any other quick questions or? No? All right. Then maybe, Daisy, what I'll do is I'll just kind of go through. I brought some documentation, kind of what we used in our capital raise and kind of business plan, if I can share those.
Yeah.
Let me go ahead and I'll just share all of my windows, I think. All right. That's everyone can see my screen here now, right? So I'll start off here. Can everybody see? Daisy, can you see?
Yes.
Okay. So this is just a map. I'm showing you where Three Rivers is to give you guys perspective. So obviously here we are in Michigan. You have Detroit on one side, Chicago here. So this is just south of Kalamazoo. You have Notre Dame University's right here. Indiana is very, very illegal, very illegal. They're not even medical. They don't even possession's still legal. So that's great for us because we're 18 miles north of the Indiana border here in Three Rivers. And one of the things we did marketing wise is Wednesdays we refer to as Hoosier Hump Day. And there's a 16% sales tax on all cannabis in Michigan. So on Wednesdays, if you have an Indiana driver's license, we'll pay your sales tax. And our sales have gone up fivefold on Wednesdays since we launched that about a year and a half ago. So for us, it's good that Indiana is still very illegal, and we have a lot of people coming up. But so Three Rivers, this is the town we're in here, kind of zooming in. Like I said, south of Kalamazoo, about 30 miles south of Kalamazoo, which would be the largest kind of city in the area. Although the nice thing about Three Rivers, it's a population of 7,000, so it's a small town, but there's a lot of lakes around here, a lot of lakes, and this is St. Joseph River, one of the Three Rivers, so a huge river as well. But you have a lot of lake communities. So this 7,000 population for this city is actually, or this town is actually a commerce hub. So generally about a 10-15 mile radius, this is where everybody goes for shopping. These are your grocery stores. This has Walmart, Menards, Home Depot, Meijer, all the big box stores. It's all here in Three Rivers. And the surrounding area is probably about 40 to 50,000 population. But in the summertime, that population grows to about 80,000 because it's a lot, like I said, a lot of lake homes, camps and so forth for individuals that are coming from Chicago, Detroit, Indianapolis, and Grand Rapids. It's all here in Southwest Michigan. So when we started here in our town, this was the map they gave us, and they basically, you see 131 is the major expressway that comes through here. It's about 25 to 35,000 cars a day. So it's a great expressway to be on. And then M60 Business is the one that goes through it across the state. And when we got the zoning, they had circled this building right here, saying this is where we want to have cannabis in town. So we went ahead and we bought this building, as you see, Confluence is here. So showing from the road, unfortunately, like I looked here earlier, the pictures are still about a year old, so it doesn't have our new tenants in here. But this is our building. It came with a nice big billboard already built in. This is the dispensary right here. This is now the taco place, and then this is the liquor store. And you can see here the taco place previously used to run a truck in our lot. We did it as a way to kind of coming soon so people could get used to and really love the tacos. So again, it was intentionally as focused. We as I leased this out, we wanted to make sure that we would create tenants or find tenants that would complement our business. So we had groups like barber shops and tattoo parlors and others that wanted to come in here. We just really didn't think it was a good business fit for what we were trying to do. So again, with the cannabis being one side of it, having tacos and liquor, we just figured is kind of it goes hand in hand. So anyway, so this is the building that we purchased. We were the first to open in the town of Three Rivers. We are now one of 8. So there are 8 dispensaries in this town. Again, population 7,000 in the town itself. That is the big problem with Michigan. What you're seeing is it's an unlimited license state. So your big MSOs really aren't competing here. So your big, your Cresco's, PharmaCanns, Sunnysides, they're not really GTIs operating in the state because it's too competitive. There's no barriers to entry. So they're still issuing new licenses for grow and for dispensaries. So what happens on the grow side is that there's so much supply that if you know basic supply and demand, the prices are really, really cheap. So when we opened about 2.5, 3, actually this is our 3rd year. In June we'll be open for 3 years. When we opened, a pound of wholesale cannabis was about 2,500. Now a pound of wholesale cannabis is about $250. So we might sell the same amount of product, but the revenues just come down tremendously. And that's a statewide issue. So as before we open, we realized that it's a very competitive state and there's no barriers to entry. So we came up with a business plan that we felt really it was built upon our strengths and would help differentiate us from others in town, not knowing how many would actually be in town. So our whole philosophy, let me kind of pull up here if I can. Our whole philosophy is based upon, we sent out a pitch book. We came up with the idea of the concept. And what we really thought about was what can make us different is really focusing on the fact that we're local. I've had a house, my family's had a house there since the 60s. My neighbors lived there for 20 years. Everybody we look to hire, we're all from the local high school. Every single person is local that works there. So we really, really want to understand that's one competitive advantage that we have is that these other groups that are coming in from Detroit and across the state don't know this local market. So we launched the company with the idea of being entirely focused on the local, to the point where even this is a rudimentary original draft of it, but our logo itself, these are the 3 rivers. So we took the map of downtown 3 Rivers. We took the 3 rivers themselves and then added cannabis leaves so it looks like stalks coming out of there. So again, it's a subtle hint to the fact that we're a local 3 river company. Between myself, Monada Capital is my LLC, my partner Mara, who again lived next door, and then our third partners were my clients here in Illinois. These 2 brothers owned a company here in Chicago called Dispensary 33, which was the first dispensary to open in Chicago in 2015, and it was the highest grossing dispensary subsequently for the next 4 years in the state of Illinois. And these gentlemen, they knew how to get the business going, how to apply for it, and get the license. So again, if we look at the way we constructed the team to start with, and again, this is a way to also make sure you focus on risk. We really put together a team where I was a specialist in real estate and finance and capital markets. Mara was local, but also has a master's degree in plant biology. So, and she knew all the local, and had been a grower there for years. So she knew everybody that was growing, everybody enthusiasts locally. And then these 2 brothers, the Isis brothers, our third partner, they have owned and operated dispensaries now for over 10 years. So they were able to do all the licensure and fill everything out for us. So really putting together the standard operating procedures. So what we saw was really kind of a really all-star team coming into this city. I won't go into full detail here, but basically it's an overview of who we are. We put together this LLC to buy the building. The building is 16,000 square foot building. You know, why does it make sense? Because we know our plan was to create an anchor tenant with the dispensary and then have other synergistic businesses open up. So Confluence 3 Rivers, Confluence 3R, or Confluence Cannabis is the name of the company. The Confluence, the cannabis company. And again, a lot of people are why 3 Rivers. So a lot what I just explained to you about the whole idea that it is a lake community, it's a central processing hub, but more importantly, between Mara and myself, we've spent most of our lives growing up there, so we know this township better than anybody else coming from across the state. Then with the building itself, like we mentioned, we wanted to create a building that really helped each business out. And what we've done subsequently as well is we now have billboards on both sides of town coming in, showing that you can drive in and make a right here for tacos, cannabis, and liquor. Again, we went over the background of the team. So again, this is the pitch that we're going out, to get initial financing. But B, more importantly, is this is how the deck we use to get our investors. In order to get capital to open on day one, we sold off 10% of the company, and we put a valuation on the company of $5 million. So on day one, we were able to raise $500,000, which helped us open the door and put money in the machine, in the ATMs and so forth. But as part of that, obviously, building pro forma and rent roll. So we want to see if the pro forma, if we are able to fill out all the units, this estimated size, expected rents, triple nets. If you're not familiar, it just basically means that this is the rent that the tenant's paying, but then everything else, operating expenses from a building, from property taxes to building insurance to common area maintenance, is also passed through to the tenant. So that's what a triple net lease is. Again, that's really getting into details of commercial real estate, but the triple net lease is the most beneficial lease for a landlord, because the landlord basically passes all of their operating expenses through here, and then this is more or less pure profit on the rental basis. The opposite of that would be a gross lease, where this number includes everything, all expenses. And a full service lease, even one step beyond that, means it also includes utilities, but those are very rare. But so anyway, based upon a triple net lease, so it means for 3,500 square feet, we'd be charging $22 per year plus $4.11. So actually $26.11 per square foot per year. So you divide that by 12, that's the monthly rent. So on an annual basis, 22 plus 411 equals 92,000 annually. So monthly, the rent is going to be 7,700, and here with the other ones included. So again, looking at your property taxes, building insurance, CAMs. So this is your triple net expenses. So what does that work out to on a per square foot basis? And then the cap rate, again, is how you value a company, or how you value, excuse me, a real estate property.
Sorry, why did you charge yourself more rent?
What's that?
Why did you charge yourself more rent than other units?
Because the cannabis premium.
Oh, okay.
So we knew, working within the industry, that a premium is attached to it. And again, the reason why a premium is attached to it is because they're a cannabis tenant, so it makes it a cannabis building. So it means any financing or mortgage is going to be that much more expensive. I can't go to conventional rent. I can't go to Bank of America and get a mortgage on this building anymore. So it's going to be more expensive to operate and run the building. So typically you'll see a premium pass through to the cannabis clients. And as an anecdote to that, years ago, again, when we did this 3-4 years ago, it was very common. Everybody accepted it. But now that the cannabis companies are open and they see how difficult it is actually to make a profit, and your rent can't be deducted, it's so you see a lot of these cannabis groups pushing back and trying to get more what's called market rent as opposed to premium rent. So we did intentionally charge ourselves more, but we also knew it would be a higher revenue grossing business, and it has been. So.
Thank you.
Yep. So again, all of this lends down to the fact of what's called the NOI. So the net operating income. So that's, again, what is the cap rate on your building. So what are you producing from the building? So what we had here is 151,000 was our estimated annual rent. You take out the expenses, and then that leaves you with your net operating income. And then if you take this number and divide it by, say, 7%, if that is your cap rate. So if your cap rate is 7%, then that would produce this valuation. So your NOI divided by what your expected rate of return is, that creates the value. So again, 136 divided by 7% equals 1.948 million. And in this area, the average, I think the average cap rate in the area was about 8, 7 or 8. I can't remember. I thought I had before. But so anyway, I guess we were looking at it saying at 80% of annual rents, we're adding additional expenses after the triple nets, and then saying we put a very conservative 1.5 million valuation based upon 8% cap rate, which subsequently, which helps us get that initial mortgage, but will also help us when we refinanced about a year ago. So again, going in here, dispensary pro forma. So this is what we put together. In your typical pro forma, it's a 5-year lookout. It was 22 when we did this. It was 21 when we went to marketing. Realistically, this is all pushed back a year. So this would be 23, 24, and this is where we're right now is 25. And the way we looked at it is we wanted to make sure, very conservative estimates. We knew this is public data where statewide sales were at. So we projected out, assuming monthly sales by the population, we assume that would continue to grow. But the number of dispensaries would also continue to grow, so that would ultimately reduce our revenue. So our cannabis sales, we started out projecting 4.3 million, 4.5, and 4.7. So again, where we're at right now, 2025 is 4.7. We're actually right about that right now. We're actually at about 5 million in annualized sales right now. The difference is this number of dispensaries, 498, is actually about 800. So we grossly underestimated how many dispensaries there would be in the state, but we also grossly estimated statewide sales, 2.3 billion as of last year. So last year would have been projected 1.8 billion. It was actually 3.5 billion. So the state is much greater sales. So actually in year 1 and year 2, our sales were about 7 million and 6 million. And now we're coming down to about 5 million because of the price compression. So to that extent, after 3 years, we're kind of right where we said we would be. But for the first 2 years, we were well ahead where we said we would be. So again, here we modeled everything out, looking at operating expenses, rent, staffing, payroll, taxes, utilities, administrative costs, licensing, banking software, very secure. You have to have closed circuit television, security throughout. It's required by state law. So CCTV, security, insurance, management, accounting, legal, professional, operating, other expenses, marketing, and so forth. So again, these are numbers that we're reviewing every quarter. So we're seeing where we are per budget, we're adjusting the budget, and we're managing proportionate or appropriately based upon where we're actually heading with revenue and where we are with expenses. So end result was, we were trying to, as we said, find investors, raising a total of $500,000 here. Equity participation, 1 unit would be 500,000. So we were offering 10 units available. And in addition to that, so this was the expected payback period. One of the things we did to incentivize and attract these investors was, even though we were selling off 10% of the company, what we put into the operating agreement is that 10% ownership, when it comes to distributions, or what's known as the waterfall, when money's being paid out, they're the first tranche of that waterfall, but they would also be treated as 20% ownership. So we would double the amount of distributions they were supposed to get as if they had 20% ownership until they received their entire principal investment back. So we assumed it would take a couple of years. Here we're looking at, if year 0, you have 50 up front. So we're assuming 20, 20, and then here it's by year 3 is when they're actually being paid back in full. So it reduces back down to just the 10% distribution. In reality, here we are in year 3, and we've distributed out all of our investors. So if you were a $50,000 investor, they've received, what was it right now? About 44% of their money back already in distributions. So we've, for a $50,000 investment, you've almost received $25,000 back. That'll then drop once we get them back to 50, and then they'll drop down to a 10% distribution rate. So again, the project IRR is a 33%, which is a tremendous IRR. Again, we were really conservative though, so we knew we would achieve that. An average annual distributions of 14,000, which again has been pretty much spot on. We've been doing about 14 to 17 a year. Okay, so again, sources and uses, just kind of basic stuff that you go through here, that we're raising the 500. This is what we were doing because we needed it. The last 500,000 was to get us over the finish line to open the business. So it was the remainder of build out, putting in the FF&E, furniture, fixtures, equipment, hiring, training, buying initial inventory, and then literally 50,000 we're putting in the ATMs because we own our ATMs, so we need cash on hand too. So that was the business proposal. Here was the building at this point in time. We hadn't owned it yet, or we just purchased it, so it was a wide open marquee. We hadn't customized it. It was a wide open space before. It was a 16,000 square foot big open building. We demised all this and broke it all down. Again, there's the billboard, so you can kind of see. Here's the floor plan of it. So this is the dispensary right here. This is the main road I'm showing you. Here's the dispensary. This is the taco. Here's liquor and liquor. So these two. We also have in the back of the building about another 7,000 square feet that we're trying to figure out what to do with it. So we have expansion capabilities. We're thinking about events, consumption. We've done concerts. We've had vendor fairs and stuff like that back there. Talking about maybe putting a pickleball court. I don't know, indoor golf range. I don't know. We're trying to figure things out with it, but lots of, again, we want something that will complement the existing buildings in the front. The issue we have with this is that we only have a certain amount of parking. So we can't add something that'll continuously add when these three businesses up front are already pulling in about 50, 60 cars at any given minute. So we only have about 80 parking spots. All right, so this again, just kind of some addendums here. So the other thing, the pitch, the point rolls. So the other thing, just I want to quickly show here is this is we updated this about a year and a half ago in order to refinance the building. So here we have very similar. Where now this is again we used a drone footage to show the full structure of the building. So again, this is all basically empty back here right now. But looking at what we spent, completed build out, we actually invested a little over $1 million in between buying the building and doing the build out. In the end, we were still doing, as we were building out the rest of it, the other components in the end, we ended up building, doing about 1.2, 1.3 million all in. But again, we had a payoff mortgage, so we needed to be able to pay off that private mortgage. And then showing them this is the finished front facade of the building. And this is what it now looks like on the inside. You can see it's completely separated out. And this is our sales floor. There's the taco place coming in next door there. And again, this is before, this is where we're building out the liquor store at that point in time, a year and a half ago. But again, so that's the project. The only other thing I could probably show you if you guys wanted to see right now is go into, let's see, Influence Cannabis.
Oh, we got one question here.
Yep.
Okay, my name is Shondell. I had a question for the taco. Is it anything to do with like the cannabis as well, or is it just a taco spot?
So the other tenants in the building are completely unrelated to the ownership group. So the three groups I showed you in the beginning, those three groups own the building. We're the only three owners of the building. The three of us also own the dispensary, but we sold off 10% to additional investors to kind of bring that out. And that was partly also as a marketing thing. We wanted to reach out to all the contacts we knew in Three Rivers and ask them if they want to participate. So on the one side, those that could participated, but those that couldn't, they knew we were coming. So it was a good way to kind of passively market, hey, cannabis coming into town. And they're all supporters of ours now. But as part of that, again, so the building's one entity, the Confluence Cannabis is another entity. We then, as a broker, what I did is I put up the listing for the rest of the building on CoStar, which is a national database on commercial listings. And we were able to find these two completely separate tenants. They had nothing to do with us originally. They still have nothing to do with us in the sense that they're just tenants in the building. But as we put that out and we started interviewing and talking to potential tenants, these two made the most sense to us. One, the taco place themselves, they're a family that had moved up here from Texas and had previously come from Mexico, living in Texas. Southern Texas was Tex-Mex. They'd come up here and they'd been running a very successful food truck for years. This taco truck that was parking in Walmart and all different parking lots. And their dream was to have a facility, a brick and mortar restaurant. They did not have the credit or the capital to do it, again, because they were relatively new to the US and didn't have a credit background, credit ratings. So my partners and I, we decided we would build it out for them because we became really good friends with them, got to know them, lovely family, wonderful people, and amazing food. So we built the restaurant for them. So yes, we built it out. We built the kitchen, but their lease actually for 60 months, they're paying us an extra $1,000 a month for 60 months to pay for that build out. So it was added into their lease, and after 60 months, they'll own it. So to your question there, it's unaffiliated with us, but we got to know them and it made perfect sense to have a taqueria next to ours. And it's actually, there's usually a line out the door every day. It's very, very popular where people driving from all around to come to this taqueria. And again, it just made the most sense from a business wise that we could do things together. So we have Taco Tuesdays. You come and spend, $25 with us, you get a free taco next door. So we're able to do a lot of that kind of cross marketing because of it.
Also, I'm gonna assume that, I know you said that you can't work with banks and, you can only do credit unions. Are your tenants not allowed to use banks at all since you guys are connected in a way?
They can do whatever they want. But again, they have to have the credit, you know, they have to have, they'd have to go through the same procedures as just a normal business, small business loan, but you have to have, you know, credit scores, capital and so forth. So I don't think they would have qualified for a mortgage per se because of that. But if they had everything else was perfectly fine, they're not subject to any restrictions because they're tenants within the building. They could do SBA loans because it'd just be their business is what the SBA would be investing in. Yeah, and again, to be clear, it's money center banks, national banks that have national charters. So anybody that's kind of working in multiple states, they can't participate in cannabis because they probably could, but they're afraid that if they did, they might get fined or even lose their charter. So that's why it's been credit unions and agricultural banks and state banks, really banks that don't cross state lines. However, I mean, it's kind of ironic. The reason why they say that too is because it's federal wire systems, you're crossing state lines, but we use the federal wiring system all the time. Like I said, we have ATMs. So part of our business process, we decided we bought ATMs. And it's a great thing for us because we're an all cash business. Because again, credit cards, federal banks can't use debit cards. We've tried many, many times. People come up with a solution. It works for about 2-3 months, and then the federal government shuts it down. So it's gotten to the point where we're really basically all cash. So the nice thing is we can take that cash and put it right back in our ATMs every week. And then once people are taking money out of the ATMs, it then gets wired to our account at the Bank of Michigan. So we're able to kind of wire money that way. So we don't have to do transporters every week of hiring, you know, cash movers every week. But it is an interesting, it's an issue with the industry. And again, I don't know if I'm necessarily in favor of federal legalization. I don't necessarily want every state to have cannabis, in particular now, because I think it would turn into like Philip Morris would own the industry, and you'd have the big companies and not the little operators, the mom and pops that really it is right now. But I do think there needs to be banking reform. We have to be able to be a non-cash business, because that's the other thing is we're very, very much a target for theft because it is all cash. And that's one of the things we also had to do is in the middle of our dispensary, against, can't really show the detail previously, but we do have a vault room. So we do have a room in the middle that's been reinforced steel room. So it's concrete reinforced and reinforced on the top. So it is a secure room in the middle of the facility. Any other questions or? Yeah, I just said I'd show a couple of just a couple of
Excuse me?
yep, I'm sorry.
My name is Patrick Hayes. I'm also a finance student. You said it was hard for you to get the loan. Was it also hard to get insurance, either liability or just anything in general?
That wasn't. To be honest with you, because our municipality was late in the game. Again, they only legalized it in 21, whereas the state had already more or less legalized it in 2015, 2016. So there are years and years and years of precedent of businesses in Michigan. Like I said, when we opened, there were already about 340 dispensaries were already open when we opened. So the insurance industry had already been there. The insurance industry had already put together products specifically for this. But again, just like other things, there's a cannabis premium because they insured us, but because it's a cash business, there's a higher risk and liability of theft. So we do tend to pay a higher insurance than your normal retail storefront. But it wasn't difficult to get. In fact, we had within our township, the board of within the city of Three Rivers, the board council, one of the members on the board was an insurance broker, and he was great. He got us a really good deal and really good insurance.
Okay. Questions?
No? Okay, well, I'm just showing again just some more pictures and kind of you know, the inside of it, you know, how it works. Again, this is the taco place right now. So this is what it looks like now. Actually, this is a picture from last weekend, where again we kind of put the landscaping in the front, but now our billboard has components on the top. The tacos El Tejano and Super Bev next there, and that's what these guys look like now. So the taqueria is right here, and then the Super Bev liquor store is right there. So again, you know, what it looks like, and the whole idea of confluence, and the reason why we came up with the name too is confluence is flowing together, the meeting point, or it's when rivers come together. There's a confluence of rivers, and again, the town is three rivers because there's three rivers who come together. So we wanted to also use a name that paid homage to the local. And you can see here's in the background here, this is our check-in desk when you come in, and then this is so your check-in area, waiting area has to be separate from your sales floor. But you'll see here, this is the map of downtown Three Rivers, and you see again, these are the rivers coming through it, and our logo basically is just a mirror image of the three rivers themselves with cannabis put on top to grow out of it. So, well, I think that's all I have to share. I don't know if there's any other questions or anything about, you know, how we did it, anything about commercial real estate, finance, structured finance, anything for that matter.
Any questions? If not, then I'll ask. So I have one question.
Mhm.
Any advice for students that want to go on commercial real estate and cannabis? Like how can, especially the cannabis industry, if someone want to start business there, or if they want to get a job there, how do they start? Where do they?
Sure. Well, I mean, the probably the, let me see, the easiest, but the most obvious are what are called the MSOs, the multi-state operators. These are the definition of the MSO basically means that they're vertically integrated, so they do everything from grow to transport to also processing. So they'll create derivatives, so they'll create gummies, they'll create vapes, they'll do pre-rolls, so they'll process the product and then also have the retail storefront. These are massive companies. Most are publicly traded. So a company like Green Thumb Industries, GTIB is their ticker symbol. They're actually they're down now. They're about a $2 billion company. They're as high as 5 billion at one point. But those guys will have retail real estate departments. So they'll have internal groups that are looking as they look to expand, to manage. You know, they are looking for the leasing side of it, but also the property asset management. So if somebody wants to get a corporate start, it would be to join a company like that, like a GTI. Again, Illinois itself, Chicago, we actually are the global center for cannabis. Chicago is worldwide. And the reason why is because from 2015 until finally 2022, when the additional licenses were issued, the state of Illinois created the MSO. They limited the amount of groups that could apply for licenses. And once those groups got licenses, they were able to get up to 10. And then nobody else was allowed to get licenses and nobody else was allowed to grow. So these companies that were in Illinois, not only did they have, you know, 10 dispensaries and no new ones were coming for years and there were barriers to entry, they also owned the grow and they were massive grow. So they were 250 to 500,000 square foot facilities, you know, $500,000, 500,000 square feet of grow, and there are only 11 of them in the state of Illinois. In comparison, Michigan has about 2,000 growers. So there were 11 of them in the state of Illinois. They had massive production, massive growth. And because of the delays of anybody else coming in, they were able to really amass huge hoards of cash. Their balance sheets were just filled with cash. They were able to then publicly list in the Canadian exchanges, become public companies. And many other states adopted Illinois' application for licenses. So these individuals basically then just went across the country and filled out licenses on states that they found were very that had barriers to entry, so they weren't open license states. So going to places like Nevada, Florida, well, Pennsylvania, Ohio, you know, specific states like that where it's more difficult. These guys came in there and they massively launched, and again, these are publicly traded. So four of the five largest companies are Curaleaf, PharmaCann, Cresco, and Green Thumb, and they're all based in Chicago. And these are multi-billion-dollar publicly traded companies. A company like Trulieve is out of Florida, and then there's some others based out of Massachusetts and California. California is actually not a big one. They had their MedMen kind of went belly up. But yeah, it's it's a difficult industry to get into in that sense, competing with these MSOs, but the MSOs are huge. They're massive. They're multi-billion-dollar companies with thousands and thousands of employees. If you're not interested in going that kind of big corporate route, really any municipality just starting to work in the industry, getting an understanding. My initial entrance was working again with specific clients to help them find real estate, and that's what got me the introduction into the actual industry. And as I learned more and more and more that way, I realized I wanted to become an operator myself. That's how I made that transition. But it is a booming industry. It's still growing. What I think last year our sales about 35 billion. It's now legal recreationally legal in more than half of the population. So I think once Ohio passed it last year, that officially made it over 50% of the population lives in recreational states. So it's growing. It's out there, and knock on wood, hopefully the federal government doesn't attack it and reverse it. But I think there's tons of opportunities, both from a real estate side, but also just coming in from a business side of it and understanding how the business operates.
How about commercial real estate?
So commercial real estate, again, it's a compensation deferred industry. So I always tell this, it's very difficult if you're coming out of school and you don't have much money to live on, and you want to get involved with real estate. What typically happens is you're going to have multiple jobs. So you're going to work real estate through the day, and you're going to try and build it up, and it probably takes about 6 to 12 months really to get going. But then it can be great. Then you're your own boss. I mean, everybody in real estate works for themselves. They're all 1099 contractors because of the way that the industry works. So you get individually licensed, and you individually then hang your license with a company, and then you're a contractor for that company. So nobody's W-2. It's all commission based, and then you're responsible for kind of handling your own taxation and so forth. But what I would suggest is finding a team to join. In particular, if it's your first time getting into real estate, commercial real estate, join a group, whether as developers. There's large commercial companies, your JLLs, your Cushman Wakefields, Marcus Millichap. I mean, there's tons of huge companies, and they have huge training programs where literally individuals will come in there and they learn more or less dialing for dollars, I think cold calling to get started, but then you start learning the business as you start identifying and finding potential clients. Flip side would be what I did, even though I had an extensive background in capital markets and banking, I was new to the industry. So I joined a small firm of family friends of mine, where I was literally worked on a team with a mentor who taught me everything very quickly within the kind of first 6 to 9 months, because I was later in my career. So I was really looking to kind of, again, kickstart a career change by moving from banking and finance into this. But it took a while, but but within 1 year, absolutely, it was definitely a business where it could sustain itself on an annual basis. So.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you so much for your time. And yeah, hope your business grows bigger and bigger.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And obviously, Daisy, if anybody has any other questions, feel free to reach out, and happy to answer as best as I can or help anybody out. So.
Okay, thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate it. Have a great evening.
Okay, bye.
All right. Take care. Thank you. Thanks, Daisy.